We live in a strange time. Extraordinary events keep happening that undermine the stability of our world. Suicide bombings, waves of refugees, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, the mainstream media, social justice, critical race theory, COVID-19, even Brexit. Yet those in control seem unable to deal with it. No one has any vision of a different or a better kind of future. This is a story about how over the past 40 years, politicians, finances and technological utopians, rather than face up to the real complexities of the world, retreated. Instead, they constructed a simpler version of the world in order to hang on to power. And as this fake world grew, all of us went along with it, because the simplicity was reassuring. Even those who thought they were attacking the system, the radicals, the artists, the musicians, and our whole counterculture, actually became part of the trickery. Because they too had retreated into the make-believe world, which is why their opposition has no effect and nothing ever changes. But this retreat into a dream world allowed dark and destructive forces to fester and grow outside. Forces that are now returning to pierce the fragile surface of our carefully constructed fake world.
What the heck is that? Oh my God, look at that. Holy crap. What is it doing? Whoa! Oh my God! What is happening? What is going on? Oh my God!
Oh my God, guys!
Guys, is that?
In the 1980s, more and more people in the United States were reporting seeing unexplained objects and lights in the sky. At the same time, investigators who believed in UFOs revealed that they had discovered top-secret government documents stated that alien craft had visited Earth. Documents had been hidden for 20 years, and they seemed to prove that there had been a giant cover-up. But the reality of this phenomenon was even stranger. The American government had been fabricating the entire narrative surrounding the UFO phenomenon, at least in America. That they had created a fake conspiracy to deliberately mislead the population. The lights that people imagined were UFOs were in reality new, high-tech weapons the US government was testing at the time. The government had developed the weapons because they, in turn, imagined the Soviet Union was far stronger than it was, and still wanted to conquer the world. The government wanted to keep the weapons secret, but they couldn't always hide their appearance in the skies. So it is alleged that they chose a number of people to use to spread the rumor that these were really alien visitations. One of those chosen was Paul Benefits, who lived outside a giant air base in New Mexico and had noticed strange things going on.
Years later, I sat down with Paul at dinner and told Paul exactly that everything we did was a sanctioned counterintelligence operation to convince him that what he was seeing was UFOs, and that what we didn't want him to know was that he tapped into something on the base, and we didn't want him to ever disclose that. We kind of planted the seed in Paul that what he was seeing and what he was hearing and what he was collecting was, in fact, probably maybe UFOs.
benefits and others chosen by the agency were, it is alleged, given a series of forged documents. Many of them were top-secret memos by the military describing sightings of unidentified aerial vehicles. The documents spread like wildfire. They formed the basis for the wave of belief in UFOs that would spread through America in the 1990s. This footage, for example, is similar to its modern counterpart. In reality, they were just rockets, either breaking up in the upper atmosphere or launching after dusk, reflecting sunlight back to confused viewers on the ground. The Falcon 9 rockets are the latest in rocket technology, having the ability to land themselves. They are an example of what happens when fast-moving objects pierce the Earth's upper atmosphere. It also contributed to the wider growing belief that governments lied to you, and that conspiracies were real. What the Reagan administration would do, both with Colonel Gaddafi and with the UFOs, was a blurring of fact and fiction. But it was part of an even broader program. The president's advisors had given it a name. They called it perception management, and it became a central part of the American government during the 1980s. The aim was to tell dramatic stories that grabbed the public imagination, not just about the Middle East, but about Central America and the Soviet Union. And it didn't matter if the stories were true or not, providing the distraction people and the politicians from having to deal with the intractable complexities of the real world.
Reality became less and less of an important factor in American politics. It wasn't what was real that was driving anything, or facts driving anything. It was how you could turn those facts, or twist the facts, or even make up the facts to make your opponent look bad. So perception management became a device, and the facts could be twisted. Anything could be anything. It becomes, how can you manipulate the American people?
And in the process, reality becomes what?
Reality becomes simply something to play with to achieve that end. Reality is not important in this context. Reality is simply something that you handle.
But something was about to happen that would demonstrate dramatically just how far the American government had detached from reality. The Soviet Empire was about to implode. And no one, none of the politicians, or the journalists, or the think tank experts, or the economists, or the academics, saw it coming. The collapse of the Soviet Union had a powerful effect on the West. For many, it symbolized the final failure of the dream that politics could be used to build a new kind of world. What was going to emerge instead was a new system that had nothing to do with politics, a system whose aim was not to try and change things, but rather to manage a post-political world. One of the first people to describe this dramatic change was a German political thinker called Ulrich Beck. Beck said that any politician who believed that they could take control of society and drive it forward to build a better future was now seen as dangerous. In the past, politicians might have been able to do this, but now they were faced with what he called the runaway world, where things were so complex and interconnected, and modern technologies so potentially dangerous that it was impossible to predict the outcomes of anything you did. The catalogue of environmental disasters prove this. Politicians would have to give up any idea of trying to change the world. Instead, their new aim would be to try and predict the dangers in the future, then find ways to avoid those risks. The picture Beck gave was of a political class reduced trying to steer society into a dark and frightening future, constantly peering forward and trying to see the risks coming towards them. The only aim, to avoid those risks and keep society stable. But a system that could anticipate the future and keep society stable was already being built. Pieced together from all kinds of different and sometimes surprising sources, all of them outside politics. One part of it was taking shape in a tiny town in the far northwest of the United States called East Wenatchee. It was a giant computer whose job was to make the future predictable. The man building it was a banker called Larry Fink. Back in 1986, Mr. Fink's career had collapsed. He lost $100 million in a deal and had been sacked. He became determined that it wouldn't happen again. Fink started a company called BlackRock and builds a computer he called Aladdin. It is housed in a series of large sheds in the apple orchards outside Wenatchee. Fink's aim was to use the computer to predict with certainty what the risk of any deal or investment was going to be. The computer constantly monitors the world, and it takes things that it sees happening and then compares them to events in the past. It can do this because it has in its memory a vast history of the past 50 years. Not just financial, but all kinds of events. And out of the millions and millions of correlations, the computer then spots possible disasters, possible dangers lying in the future, and moves the investments to avoid any radical change and keep the system stable.
Today I'm going to deliver 1.8 million reports.
Execute 25,000 reports.
And avert 3,000 disasters.
I'm going to monitor interest rates in Europe.
Silver prices
Drops in the Midwest.
I'm going to witness 4 billion shares change hands on the New York Stock Exchange.
and record the effects on 14 trillion in assets across 20,000 holdings.
I am Aladdin.
I am Aladdin. And today, I'll find the numbers behind it.
I will see the trends and model stones.
The connections.
The risks. I am Aladdin.
I am Aladdin, and I will get the data right.
I have 25 million lines of code.
Written by hundreds of people.
Across 2 decades.
Smarter than any algorithm.
More powerful than any processor.
Because I am Aladdin.
Because I am Aladdin.
Aladdin had proved to be incredibly successful. The assets it guides and controls now amount up to $15 trillion, which is 7% of the world's total wealth. Wenatchee was also a dramatic example of another kind of craving for stability and reassurance. More of its citizens took Prozac than practically any other town in America.
When a person's central nervous system is changed by an SSRI with that medicine, they will view things differently, and they will be strangers. They look at things differently. I have a chemical up here that changes me. I think differently. For me, it was like walking around like this for my whole life and really not knowing that I was nearsighted. I mean, really. I mean, no one had ever offered me glasses. And then all of a sudden, here comes somebody that says, okay, now try these on, try this Prozac on. And I tried it on, and for the first time in my life, I went, whoa, is this the way reality really is? Your perception can be changed, and it's frightening, it's scary to people. It speaks of science fiction almost.
Well, the medicine just kind of lets you listen to what needs to go on. And then your doctor, every time you come back, he says, "You're looking so much better." And then he just, like Jim, every time I come in, he goes, "You are so beautiful," And he isn't even sucking up. I mean, he's being nice, You're beautiful, you're nice, you're friendly, you've got so much going for you. I think, yeah, I do, yeah. So I go out and I tell my friends, oh, I feel so much better about myself. Mom goes out, oh, I feel so much better about myself. So your friends start saying, I've seen such improvement. And everybody improves all the way around. They see improvement, it's like everybody's kind of brainwashing each other into being happy.
But there was a more effective way of reassuring people that was being developed that did not involve medication. It too came from computer systems, artificial intelligence. But the way to do it had been discovered by accident. Back in the 1960s, there had been optimistic dreams that it would be possible to develop computers that could think like human beings. Scientists then spent years trying to program the rules that govern human thought, but they never worked. One computer scientist at MIT became so disillusioned that he decided to build a computer program that would parody these hopeless attempts. He was called Joseph Weizenbaum, and he built what he claimed was a computer psychotherapist. Just like a therapist, people could come and talk to the machine by typing in their problems. Weizenbaum called the program Eliza. He modeled it on a real psychotherapist called Carl Rogers, who was famous for simply repeating back to the patient what they had just said. That is what Eliza did. The patient sat in front of the screen and typed in what they were feeling. The program repeated it back to them, often in the form of a question.
Men are all alike.
In what way?
They're always bugging us about something or other.
Can you think of a specific example?
Well, my boyfriend made me come here.
Your boyfriend made you come here?
He says I'm depressed much of the time.
I'm sorry to hear that you're depressed.
It's true. I am unhappy.
Do you think coming here will help you not to be unhappy?
Well, I need some help. That much seems certain.
One of the first people to use Eliza was Weizenbaum's secretary, and her reaction was something that he had not predicted.
I asked her to my office and sat her down at the keyboard, and then she began to type. And of course, I looked over her shoulder to make sure that everything was operating properly. After 2 or 3 interchanges with the machine, she turned to me and she said, "Would you mind leaving the room, please?"
And yet she knew, as Weizenbaum did, that Eliza didn't understand a single word that was being typed into it.
You're like my father in some ways. You don't argue with me.
Why do you think I don't argue with you?
You're afraid of me.
Does it please you to think I'm afraid of you?
My father's afraid of everybody. My father's afraid of everybody.
Weizenbaum was astonished. He discovered everyone who tried Eliza became engrossed. They would sit for hours telling the machine about their inner feelings and incredibly intimate details of their lives. They also liked it because it was free of any kind of patronizing elitism. One person said, after all, the computer doesn't burn out, look down on you, or try to have sex with you. What Eliza had shown is that in an age of individualism, what made people feel secure was having themselves reflected back to them, just like in a mirror. Artificial intelligence changed direction and started to create new systems that did just that, but on a giant scale. They were called intelligent agents. They work by monitoring individuals, gathering vast amounts of data about their past behavior, and then looked for patterns and correlations from which they could predict what they would want in the future. It was a system that ordered the world in a way that was centered around you. And in an age of anxious individuals, frightened of the future, that was reassuring, just like Eliza. A safe bubble that protected you from the complexities of the world. But the applications of this new direction proved fruitful and profitable. What was rising up in different ways was a new system that promised to keep the world stable. Its tentacles reached into every area of our lives. Finance promised that it could control the unpredictability of the free market. And individuals were more and more monitored to stabilize their physical and mental states. But increasingly, the intelligent agents online predicted what people would want in the future, and how they would behave. And the biggest change was to politics. In a world where the overriding aim was now stability, politics became just part of a wider system of managing the world. The old idea of democratic politics, that gave a voice to the weak, was eroded. And a resentment began to grow out on the edges of society.